Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Zoe and this is Fox and Sloth Apothecary. Today, I want to talk about 5 tarot decks for beginners. I pulled these decks from my personal collection and we're going to go through pretty much all of the cards and why I think that they're good for beginners. So let's change camera angles and let's get into it. Come on! And here we are. Okay, let's get started. The first deck on my list is the traditional Rider-Waite Smith. I know, it's absolutely crazy. Who would have guessed? I know that this might not be everybody's first pick because it's like, well, it's boring. That's what all the books say. That's what everyone tells you to do. And trust me, that's coming from someone that does not like to start at step 1. I'm like, no, I don't need to do that. I can just start from step 5 instead. I got this figured out. But honestly, most of the books that you're going to pick up, most of the articles you're going to read, the videos you watch, will likely use a Rider-Waite Smith or a Rider-Waite Smith based deck. So using this deck just allows you to figure out the symbolism and kind of the origin story of the card meanings. And then you can go from there and you can get all the fun decks. So I specifically am going to continue to refer to this deck as Rider-Waite Smith. It was illustrated by Pamela Coleman Smith. And you'll also hear it often referred to as just a Rider-Waite deck. And that's lame because Pamela Coleman Smith is awesome. She puts so much into this deck, and we need to say her name. So you will always see it referred to as RWS or Rider-Waite Smith, at least on my platform. I think that this deck is a great option, not just because you'll find a lot of instruction for this deck, but also it's a great price. I mean, it's typically $12 or under.
I'd buy that for $1.
It's easy to find. The card stock isn't amazing, but it's not horrible. So that honestly, if you beat up the deck learning how to shuffle or carrying it everywhere with you, it's not that big of a deal. It's a great introduction into the history, the origin, and the hidden symbolism within these cards. All right, let's move on to deck number 2. It is the Morgan Greer Tarot. So we're still going with that Rider-Waite Smith based tarot decks. This one, oh, I love the colors in this deck. They're very what's the word? The saturated color. Try to get it to focus better. There we go. I would describe this deck as your Rider-Waite Smith deck, but zoomed in. A lot of the cards, if it involves a person, you're really only going to see them from waist up, and there's not a lot going on in the background. It focuses on the up front person, their facial expressions, and that symbolism compared to the landscape of the deck. So I think this is a great deck if you're somewhat familiar with tarot, but are still looking to expand your knowledge and kind of continue that introduction into it. The colors are awesome. It also is very rarely over $13. So it's easily accessible. I will say I don't see it in stores as often, but there's so much online shopping now that you'd still easily be able to find it. I'm pretty sure that I have an Amazon link to it in the blog post that is the companion to this video. It's just not so busy, and I think that it offers a good opportunity for you to use your intuition. It does come with a little white book. I don't think I have mine in the box. I don't. And so does the Rider-Waite Smith, but the booklets don't have very much going on for them. You're going to find your basic keywords, but other than that, there's really no description. It's not going to go into reversals. It's not going to offer you much more than keywords. But because it's part of the Rider-Waite system and it follows that symbolism, you can use easily any of your companion books that you're following along to use and learn tarot with. That is probably one of my favorite cards. Also, side note, if you're doing Instagram or any other social media, I feel like personally, this tarot deck photographs really well. The saturated colors respond well to filters and to being photographed, and it just catches your eye. Okay, let's move on to deck number 3. And that is the Modern Witch Tarot deck. So I actually just did a fun project and I did my first deck mod and I edged this deck. Otherwise, it typically just has white edges. Oh, I'm hitting the stand. Otherwise, it typically just has white edges, but it's still an awesome deck. Again, we're following that Rider-Waite system. We're going to see a lot of the same symbolism, a lot of the same card artwork, but this card takes a much more feminine, modern, badass, like, twist to it. Oh, I think I'm going through these really fast. Sorry. You're going to see a lot of the same concepts, just with that like modern twist. I think it's a great deck if you're looking for something that feels like current, fun, but still like easy to read. This is like a good like dip your toe into the non-traditional artwork kind of deck, because you're still going to be able to easily recognize the symbolism and the cards, but you're also getting something that's not like the same boring artwork in a sense. I feel like because they're modern images, there's also a relatability to these cards that maybe is missing in some of the more traditional decks. Again, I like the color scheme, that's the word. I like the color scheme to this deck. I think it's fun. It's bright, so it doesn't seem so gloomy or old, maybe. This deck also, again, super affordable. I think when I first bought it, it was probably in the 20s when it like from very first came out. But now, honestly, I've seen it in Marshall's a couple times, and I've seen it. It's usually at Barnes and Noble, and it's online, and it's usually on sale. I don't think I've seen it for like over 15 in a while. And that's not saying that it's not good because it's cheaper. I just think it's been on the market long enough that now there's so many of them that it's not being priced as high. The artist has also like expanded, and now there's puzzles and coloring books, and the Modern Witch Tarot has kind of just turned into like this whole collection, which I think is really cool. So maybe I have not personally picked up the puzzle, but maybe, or not the puzzle, the coloring book. I haven't personally picked up the coloring book, but if I did, I bet you could use it as a really cool study tool for the symbolism within the card. I'll have to look at it next time I'm in the store. I also love that there's girls and people with like blue hair, different colored hair, the badass nails. This is just a really great, I think it's like next best step kind of deck. for a beginner. Okay. Also, if you get the bravery to ever do a deck mod, 10 out of 10 recommend it. Oh, yes, before I forget. It also comes with like a little white book, but it's more in depth. First off, it's hardbound, which is super cool. It goes into each card, and each card has its own page. I think that's the big difference. Well, each major arcana does. The big difference between like the little white book, you're going to see it set up more like the minor arcana, where you're just going to have like a word and some symbolism. Except for even their minor arcana is pretty in depth. Well, for like a mini paragraph. It does not include reversals, but that's okay. And then they usually have some spreads in the back. This deck also came with an extra card. Everything is fine, like the 10 of Swords. So I just think that this is like a good first set when you feel like you want something more than the traditional tuck box and artwork. And you're like, I've been there, done that. I'm ready to like take that next step. This is like a good set. So the next deck on my list, number 4, is Waite Newman, a Sacred Animal Tarot. And it is published by the same company as A Modern Witch, that Liminal 11. So they have very similar boxes. All of their boxes now are these like magnetic bottoms, whereas before they were the open top. But pretty much the same boxes, the same like little white books inside, same cardstock. Let's see, same book. Okay. But let's get into this deck. So you guessed it. It follows the Rider-Waite Smith system. All the decks in this list do. But it's okay. If I called the Modern Witch Tarot deck like your next best step, this would be like one step above that. When you feel confident in the symbolism and being able to recognize the cards, I think a deck like this is a really great opportunity to then start to engage and grow your intuition. Because yes, they're labeled, and yes, they follow a lot of the same symbolism, but the artist has added extra to it. They have created their own world in a sense. So you're not going to be able to necessarily look at a card right away and be like, oh, 100%, I know exactly what that is because I recognize these 5 symbols that I was learning about yesterday. You might recognize some. You might recognize all of them. But then I think there's extra added to it that allows you to be like, okay, but in this spread spot, I think it means X, Y, and Z. You'll still be able to use this deck along any of the introduction booklets that you may be following that are following the Rider-Waite system. I also just love the color scheme to this deck. It's more earthy. There's some blues. But I'd easily hand this to a beginner that I'd say has at least read or some understanding of tarot and reading tarot, but is looking for something to continue to stay engaged and trust their intuition more. I think that's the big thing with this deck, is that you're going to have to trust the knowledge, your memorization, and importantly, your intuition on what the cards mean. Again, it's a really great price point. I think I saw it listed on Amazon for like And it was like $15. So again, under 20. All of the decks we've seen so far are under $20. So I'd say that this is a good deck that you could pull off the shelf, try it out for the $15, $16 and not be out $40, $50 if you feel like it doesn't work out. All right, and then my last deck, deck number 5, is not for everyone, and it is the Mood Tarot. I would describe this deck as like tarot memes. It's not for everyone because it includes quite a bit of profanity and kind of crude humor. But I think that that's why I love it as a beginner deck. I know that sounds crazy, but there's something about these memes that are like to the point. They're not just like out of left field, doesn't make any sense. Like they make sense to the card's definition. And like this one, the tower was full of black mold and cocaine, thieving ghosts anyways. The whole point of the tower card isn't that you were wrong altogether, but that your base was wrong. So the building was infested with black mold and cocaine. So that doesn't mean that you can't rebuild again, but you got to do something different. And I find that this deck really sets you up to be able to like quickly think and make those connections, but in a not heady way. Like you're not sitting there being like, oh, well, I see a pentacle in the left corner and there's that guy in the far back and he's wearing red. So that must mean X, Y, and Z. Like it's like thoughtless connection. Hopefully that's making sense. But once I realized that it was helping reinforce those card definitions, it quickly became like a go-to. Another super cool bonus is that the cards of this deck are plastic. So as a beginner deck, like you literally can take it everywhere. You can take it to the coffee shop and not worry about like spilling your coffee on it and just like study, use, and enjoy it. I mean, I still pull this deck off like regularly because sometimes I think that it tells you those hard truths that you just need to hear in like a light and funny tone. Otherwise, it'll make you cry. I understand that not everyone's going to enjoy and find like the crude humor appealing. So that's why there's 4 decks ahead of this one. But it follows that Rider-Waite Smith, so you're picking up all that symbolism. And I think this is a great like reinforcement tool. The price is much steeper than any of the previous decks on this list, but it's not mass produced. So you're not buying it directly from like Barnes and Noble or Amazon. You're buying it directly from the creator. And thus you're supporting a small business. So I think that makes it worth its price point, which still in a comparison is not that much more compared to, I think, any of the other cards. Okay, I think it's like double. It's probably about $40, but I mean, it's worth it. And those are my 5 beginner tarot decks. So let's change camera views and we'll say goodbye. Come on. So there you have it, 5 tarot decks for beginners. These tarot decks came specifically from my collection, so there's probably others out there that I definitely think would be good for beginners. There's also other types of tarot systems. All of the decks in my collection are pretty much Rider-Waite Smith based, but there's also Thoth, there's Marcialis, there is a lot of different types of tarot systems that a beginner could start in if that's the kind of tarot that they would like to read. I personally just love Rider-Waite-Smith. I like the symbolism, I like the illustrations, and I love the dupes, the copies, all the different versions of the deck, as you saw. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, leave them below, and I can't wait till you come back. Bye, friends.